COVID-19 really managed to put the world upside down, but we are here to talk more about all of those stressful pandemic stories. We hear in the news every day. Instead, we would like to talk about planes. In the year 2020, people haven't been able to fly as often as they used to. As a result, a lot of planes are now abandoned or parked in huge empty spaces waiting to be dismantled or bought by another airline. In the meantime, let's have a look at 15 incredible abandoned planes due to the pandemic. Number 15. KCI. One of the busiest airports in the Midwest of the USA is Kansas City International Airport, and after a historic 2019 in which it recorded traffic of almost 12 million passengers throughout the year, the number now dropped by 80%, and many airlines in the country are now using it to park the planes while they wait for the flight to start regular operations. Here you can see a bunch of planes from Delta Airlines, and I think it's quite interesting to see that they put those planes in there. After all, Kansas City is very close to Tornado Alley. The weather conditions of the area might be a bit of a threat. Good thing they have insurance though. Number 14. Cathay Pacific. Hong Kong is one of the main hubs in Asia. Everyone who travels within that continent is likely going to have at least a stopover in Hong Kong at some point, but things haven't been that busy for these hubs, as they usually are. In fact, at some point during this pandemic, the daily passengers were just enough to fit one single flight. And here's a picture where you can see a lot of Cathay Pacific aircraft waiting for brighter days, in which they'll be able to carry as many passengers as they did before 2020. Number 13. British Airways. Gatwick Airport is the second busiest airport in the UK, but during the pandemic, it also became one of the fullest airports in terms of abandoned planes. Just look at this fleet of British Airways planes. This British airline had to stop operations for a while, and the best place to put a lot of its planes was this famous airport that isn't being used so much these days. Number 12. Lufthansa airplanes. For the longest time, Lufthansa Airplanes was the second largest airline in Europe in terms of passengers being carried, and not surprisingly, it's also the largest airline in all Germany. But things look a bit unclear for the airline, as there are a lot of travel restrictions within the European Union and not many people are flying for that reason. You can find a lot of the Lufthansa airplanes sitting at the Frankfurt airport waiting for things to change so they can continue connecting passengers all around the world, especially around Europe. Number 11. Westjet planes. If you've been to Canada, then you've probably been on a Westjet plane. This company started operations in the mid-90s and became popular due to its affordable prices. Within just a few years, it started competing against major airlines in the country, and at some point, it was traveling to over 100 destinations. However, when the pandemic hit, most of their planes had to sit grounded at the Vancouver International Airport. Some restrictions are being lifted, but their schedule isn't as busy as it was before the March of 2020. Number 10. Charles de Gaulle Airport. Now here's the largest airport in France. It's Charles de Gaulle International Airport, also known as Roissy Airport, and besides being the largest airport in the country, it's also the second busiest airport in all of Europe. However, today this airport is the perfect spot for airplane parking. Just check out this picture and look at all those planes, every one of them empty, and they don't seem to be going anywhere until the virus is under control. Number 9. Air China. China, the first country to experience the virus, was also the first one to shut down businesses in an effort to prevent the spread of it. The shutdown included airports. People were not traveling as often as before, and as a result, the number of flights leaving and going into China decreased. Here you can see a bunch of Air China airplanes parked at Beijing International Airport, which is one of the two main airports in the capital and the hub for Air China, one of the big three airlines in the country. Number 8. American Airlines. The Tulsa International Airport played an important role in the years of World War II. But in the post-war era, some of the former Air Force hangars were acquired by American Airlines. Today, this is the airport that they use as the main spot for the maintenance of their planes, so it shouldn't surprise is that it's also the spot they use to park a lot of the planes that they're not using right now. Number 7. More Delta passenger planes. There's Birmingham in the UK, but there's also another Birmingham which is in the most populous city in the state of Alabama. That's also the area in which we can find the largest and busiest airport in the state today. However, it's busy in a different way. The airport is full of Delta planes, big and small airplanes that have nowhere to go for a while. This is a good time to mention that the people in charge of Delta Airlines are making an effort to avoid cutting salaries and firings. Sadly, with fewer flights, there's less income, but they're doing what they can to keep their workers employed and happy. Number 6. Tarbes Pyrénées Airport. In regular times, this international airport isn't as busy as other airports in Europe. In fact, there are only about 450,000 passengers in total every year. It might sound like a big number, but it's very small compared to other airports. Most of the passengers that use this airport are Catholic pilgrims traveling to the French town of Lourdes. However, today this airport is full of parked airplanes, a sight we thought we'd never see. Just look at this line of planes, it almost looks endless. Can see all sorts of planes in here. Number 5. More British airplanes. Prior to the development of the famous Heathrow, Bournemouth was London International Airport. Today, not a lot of people hear about this airport. It's just another place in southern England, more than an hour away from the center of all the famous British places you hear about. However, this airport has gained a lot of relevance during this pandemic. Besides Gatwick, Bournemouth is the other spot that British Airways have picked as the parking spot for their planes. Number 4. Korean Air. South Korea has gained a lot of popularity over the last couple of years. Incheon International Airport is one of the most important ones in the area, but today with limited flights going in and out of the country, they're one of the major parking spots for planes. Here you can see a bunch of planes by Korean Air with nowhere to go. Number 3. Jet2. Traveling around the UK doesn't have to be that expensive, and thanks to Jet2, a low-cost airline that operates within the country. But since there aren't a lot of people flying these days, there's a bunch of Jet2 airplanes parked at the Birmingham airport, which is one of the bases from which Jet2 operates. But there are 2 Birmingham in the world, and the 2 of them have a bunch of parked airplanes in them right now. Now it's time for today's best pick, but the picture I chose for the day shows us a plane that's literally in the middle of nowhere. Looks as if it's in the middle of the desert, and it almost looks abandoned. Well, let's check some airplanes that were technically abandoned in the middle of nowhere during the pandemic. Number 2. Mojave Air Spaceport. If you go 95 miles out of Los Angeles towards the desert, you'll find a city called Mojave, and in this place, you'll find an old airport that started as a small local airport for the gold and silver mining industry. Years later, space was taken by the Marine Corps during World War II, and more recently it became the home of more than 60 companies that work in the areas of flight development, aerospace, design, flight, testing, research, and other relevant fields. However, things changed a bit for this airport in 2020 as the pandemic began. The Mojave Air Spaceport is now used by many airlines from around the world to store their unused airplanes. Qantas Airlines, which is Australia's largest airline, and a bunch of its planes all the way from Australia just to store them in this airport in the middle of the desert on the western side of the USA. These airplanes are a long way from their home base, but I guess it's cheaper to store these planes in this spot as opposed to having them in an expensive airport in Australia. Number 1. Alice Springs. One of the places that gained a lot of relevance during the pandemic was Alice Springs in Australia. This remote town is part of the Northern Territory of the country, and it's been known among travelers into the desert plains, mountain ranges, and rocky gorges that are unique to this part of the world. However, there is one spot in Alice Springs that started operations in 2014 with a very small beginning. It's an aircraft parking facility founded by Tom Vincent in 2014. Until the beginning of 2020, they had only been able to get 40 jets to park at the facilities, but as soon as airlines stopped operations, Tom started getting calls from airlines from all over the world just so they could bring their planes to his place. They got Lufthansa all the way from Europe and Singapore Airlines all the way from Southeast Asia. They had a lot of space in this parking spot that's literally in the middle of nowhere. However, they're now at a point in which they need to expand. They would like to grow as a business. They just didn't think everything was going to happen so fast. And by the way, aircraft storage facilities seem to be a great business. This is the end of our video. Will you take risk of travel in this COVID pandemic? Just give your views in this comment box. You can also watch some more amazing videos on our channel here.